Nothing in the Lou Brydges Show is intended to be legal analysis, legal advice, or legal recommendations that would be applicable to your particular situation. Everyone in foreclosure or underwater with their mortgage are encouraged to seek legal counsel for a review of your specific situation. Welcome to the weekly broadcast of the Lou Brydges Show, telling the truth about the foreclosure crisis and the greatest financial crime in history that created it. Are you in foreclosure, at risk of foreclosure, or underwater with your mortgage? Do you know someone who is? Every week on this show, you'll get real answers from a real attorney. Lou Brydges will explain options in the foreclosure process. He'll talk about defective mortgages, mortgage restructuring, loan modification, short sale negotiation, and discuss what to look for when choosing a foreclosure defense attorney. Lou is an experienced foreclosure defense lawyer on the front lines of mortgage defense and litigation. Lou is dedicated to helping you keep your property. And now, it's time for the Lou Brydges Show and the truth about foreclosure. Here's your host, Lou Brydges.
Good morning, Chicago. Lou Brydges here with my wingman, Mike Main, for the Lou Brydges Show.
Hello, Chicagoland.
And a little over 200 years ago, Thomas Jefferson warned the American people, warned our generation, and perhaps most particularly, Thomas Jefferson wrote back in 1802, in light of the current financial crisis that was ongoing then, as there is one now, I believe our banking institutions are more dangerous to liberties than our standing armies. If the American people ever allow the banks to control the issue of currency, then the banks and the corporations that will grow up around them will deprive the people of all their property until their children wake up homeless on the continent their fathers conquered. Well, if you've been following the news the last few months, and particularly the last couple of weeks, you see that the banks, the major banks, are doing everything they can to fulfill this prophecy by taking all of the property. And again, I want to make very clear, I'm talking not about your local neighborhood banks or community banks or even your regional banks. I'm talking about the big national banks that have squeezed out all the regional banks and local banks since the repeal of the Glass-Steagall Act back in 1998, and systematically have been taking over the currency, and most particularly, which has been demonstrated in the last month or so, have come to dominate the two agencies that they most deal with. The regulatory agency that's supposed to oversee them, the Office of Comptroller of the Currency, known as the OCC, and the Federal Reserve, known as the Fed. And the major banks I'm talking about are the very big boys, the J.P. Morgan Chase, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, Deutsche Bank, Citi. And if you've been following the news, it's just, I don't know where to start. We're going to have to expand our news segment to be basically the whole show, because this is a show about the truth. And the purpose of this show is to be among the growing number of Americans that are speaking the truth and trying to advise and get the word out to the American people about how evil these institutions are and the systematic. They've become criminal enterprises, basically. They just engage in crimes throughout. Everything from if you've been following the commodity stories about how the Goldman Sachs and through its subsidiaries and the other major banks, Goldman Sachs is an investment bank, but the other major banks that Goldman Sachs work with have been hoarding and storing and
manipulating the prices of the commodities,
yes,
by doing trades improperly.
Yes, and also just keeping them off the market, so they're driving up the price of aluminum and everything. And this is what happens. And also, according to the New York Times and the Washington Post and the LA Times, the articles that they've been stockpiling oil tankers, pipelines, other infrastructure type stuff, pipes for pipelines and things. Because, you see, when you have a lot of cash on hand, you can do that. You can start to manipulate things. You can start to, keep products. You can buy mass quantities of products and keep them off the market till the price drives up. And then you just greatly increased your own wealth. Wealth, use of cash creates wealth. But the biggest problem, perhaps, is that the branches of government, the OCC, and now we put on our website a bunch of Elizabeth Warren videos. In particular, we put on the one that was banned from that MSNBC had pulled from YouTube, where Elizabeth Warren made a fool out of one of the former moderators of their TV show Squawk Box. I never had watched the show. Who knew there was a show called Squawk Box? But apparently it had a following, but
it was a great video.
It's a great video. and it went viral on YouTube. And MSNBC asserted their copyright rights and had it pulled from YouTube, and YouTube acquiesced and pulled it, and then they banned it. And then MSNBC took it off their own video page. They fired the moderator that had been torn into a you-know-what by Elizabeth Warren. He really made a fool of himself, and I felt sorry for the guy because I don't think he intended to have come across so foolish, but he did. And Elizabeth Warren wasn't being mean. I mean, she was just correcting. She was just speaking the truth. And
her passion for that really came
the
through.
passion. And the other thing we get a chance, but we have the video on our website, and it's up there still.
On our Facebook page.
I guess we're so...
Which is facebook.com/The Lou Brydges Show. That's Bridges with a Y.
I guess,
as well, if you have any questions.
I'm also a little disappointed. Apparently, we're so under the radar that we don't even warrant. I was hoping to get sued by MSNBC, but that hasn't happened yet. In any event, what they'll probably do eventually is, assert some sort of force on Facebook and force us to take the video off. But for now, it's on there. And there are other videos. And the more interesting one, the really entertaining one, is Elizabeth Warren on a Senate committee, the Senate Banking and Finance Committee, which she's on, interviewing these representatives from the OCC, the Office of Comptroller of the Currency, and the Fed. Now, this couldn't have been staged better by Hollywood. The guy from OCC is, he's this very nerdy-looking buck-toothed guy, and he hems and haws and stutters and starts sweating. But the real thing, I get just livid with anger. You see, it all goes to these independent foreclosure reviews, which the OCC cut a sweetheart deal with the banks 2 years ago. Now, I'm going to have to give you a quick backdrop, so you got to bear with me because we got about 4 minutes left till we break. But this is very important. 2 years ago, in response to a lot of complaints by attorneys like myself around the country that these banks that service the mortgages, they don't own the mortgages, they've been servicing the mortgage, the owner is a trust that would rather restructure the mortgage, or if it was doing the right thing for itself, would rather restructure. But the trusts they've been paid off by the private mortgage insurance, and the banks are just... They're making a huge profit on this foreclosure because they're just pocketing all the cash that they get from foreclosing on these houses because the owner of the mortgage has been paid off. And they're just the servicer. They have no right to foreclose in this situation, but they could be bringing these frauds upon the court. So there's 49 of the 50 state attorney generals, including our Lisa Madigan, who was one of the leaders of this movement, started an investigation. And lo and behold, they're finding that all these attorneys are right, that these are forged documents, fabricated documents, robo-signed documents, big gaps in the chain of title. Most of the mortgages were entered into by originators who had committed unlawful inducement and deceptive inducement, fraud in the inducement, violations of the Consumer Fraud Act. Across the board, just massive crimes upon the American people. And their investigation is really gathering steam about 2 years ago. And all of a sudden, out of the blue, the OCC announces, we've reached a consent decree with the major banks to investigate on their own the accusations of abuses of the foreclosure process. A consent decree? You had no investigation pending. I mean, what is this? Well, obviously, it was an attempt to pull the rug out from under the state attorney generals. And OCC announces this consent decree. I mean, who knew? Well, what happens is the major banks went to the OCC because they control it. And they said, look, we need something to pull the rug out from under these state attorney generals. So they get this consent decree, which the banks are going to be allowed to conduct an independent foreclosure review, an IFR, independent foreclosure review of all the foreclosures of 1.5 million that they had accomplished in 2009 and 2010 up to that point. So they start doing it. Swing forward to 2 years later, 2012, 2013, they've completed 250,000 of the 1.5 million at a cost of $1 billion, $4,000 each, which is astronomical. And they were allowed to use for the independent foreclosure review their own accounting firms, their Price Waterhouse, Deloitte Touches, to whom they pay millions of dollars in fees. So it's basically like, look, we pay you $1 billion in fees. We want you to conduct this independent investigation to refute the allegations of these oddball attorneys and who, pull the rug out from under the state attorney generals. I'm going to have to finish this story in the next segment, because it gets really, really interesting, and it's very important for the American public to understand how they are controlling the Fed and the OCC and how they are, it's been the largest transfer of wealth in human history. And it's gone to a very, very, very select 1/10, 1/1000th of 1% of the population from the rest of the population, the American homeowners and the American people. The American people around the country are starting to get the word from other shows like mine and other websites and blogs and things. It's crucial. This is a absolutely crucial time in our history because to keep the Thomas Jefferson, it was a warning. He said, if the American people ever allow the private banks to control the issue of currency.
224-513-1231, 224-513-1231.
It's time to stand up and fight back.
Facebook.com/The Lou Brydges Show. That's Bridges with a Y. Please join us there.
Welcome back to the Lou Brydges Show with Louis Brydges, one of Chicago's leading foreclosure defense attorneys. Here's Lou to tell you what to look for when hiring a foreclosure defense attorney and how to avoid being conned on AM 560.
Welcome.
The Answer.
Sorry. Welcome back. Listeners, I was in the middle of telling the story about the independent foreclosure, the reviews, which are really kind of blowing the lid. Between the independent foreclosure reviews, the Elizabeth Warren questioning of the representative of the OCC and the Fed that's been becoming a viral video, which you can get on our Facebook page. There's a short version, about 4.5 minutes, and there's a long version, 13 minutes, which is just, if it doesn't cause your blood to boil, then you're not an American. I mean, because you have a situation where these independent foreclosure reviews, they were allowed to use their own in-house firms. Now, they used a very suspect. They cherry-picked the ones they were going to review. They only reviewed 250,000 of the 1.5 million over a 2-year period because they were cherry-picking, or when they come up with a bad one, they wouldn't review it. Nevertheless, despite a flawed process, despite the fact that they were not using attorneys to the review process, but accountants, despite the cherry picking, they were finding, depending on the major servicer, between 30 and 80% of the foreclosures that were accomplished by these servicers in 2009 and 2010 were improper, were based on fraudulent documents, forged documents, robo-signed documents, gaps in the chain of title, or on behalf of the wrong, the servicer didn't have any right to foreclose, and the homeowner had been wrongfully denied an application for modification. There was multiple problems with most of the foreclosures. But basically that they have been perpetrating frauds upon the courts of this land, which is what we have been telling the judges for 4 years. And so what the banks did then is they go back to OCC and they agreed to pay $9 billion to the victims of the wrongful foreclosures, and the OCC said would amend the consent decree that they didn't have to conduct any more independent foreclosure reviews. So the other 1,250,000 Americans didn't get their that were dispossessed of their homes did not get their foreclosure review, and the 250,000 that did were going to get some, most of whom where it was done wrongfully, were going to get this, $2,000 to $200 to $2,000 a couple, where servicemen were getting $100,000, but still, we're talking about a home that you lost. The family was dispossessed. The kids were taken out of school, out of the community. They had to turn in their library cards and get, and start, you go down to King County, Florida, and they're living in the backs of pickup trucks and in the parks and on the roadsides in tent cities. Well, meanwhile, there's entire subdivisions that are vacant homes that are deteriorating. So, Elizabeth Warren gets the guys, the representatives of OCC, representative from OCC, and the Fed, and the questioning. It says what was found in these independent foreclosure reviews, and they're saying they won't disclose that because it's supervisory confidential. That's the term they use, supervisory confidential. Now, wait a minute. Before I get really upset, I just want to point out one thing. I went to law school. I've been a lawyer for 33 years. I learned about attorney-client privilege. I learned about doctor-patient privilege. I learned about priest-confessor privilege. There's no such thing as a supervisory privilege. It's a made-up thing. And second of all, Who are you claiming a privilege? You're a government regulator. You work for me. And this senator is a representative of the people. She's asking you, what did you find? You allowed them to conduct an independent foreclosure review, but you know the results because you came to us and you said they've reached a new consent decree that they don't have to conduct any more of these independent foreclosure reviews. What is it that was being found exactly? And she said, and he refused to give that information to the U.S. Senator, which is like you almost couldn't have scripted this better in Hollywood. It's like he's blatantly saying, I don't work for you, I work for the banks. And guess what? Up yours, Senator. I'm not going to tell you what this is in this. No, buddy, you work for me, and this is my representative asking you what the F was found in these goddamn foreclosure reviews. You tell us, because his senator very calmly pointed out to him, you know, you're an attorney. If you were an attorney and you were representing one of these homeowners that was wrongfully foreclosed upon, wouldn't you want to know what was in this? Wouldn't this be relevant to your potential claim against the bank? And he meant yes. And you are, an employee of the homeowners, and you are the regulatory agency that's supposed to be regulating these banks for the benefit of the people. Yes. And yet you're not going to share this information with the people, including the people that received like a $2,000 check to supposedly compensate them for the loss of their family home. And, he says, well, and he hems and haws and says, well, that's under consideration. You bet it's under consideration, buddy. Your job's under consideration. So, excuse me for getting, but this just so enrages me that it becomes, the criminal activity has become so blatant, and there's such a disregard for consequences, because the consequences are just, you steal $1 billion and you get fined $100. Well, geez, what do you expect them to say? I'm not going to do that again. But there are people out there, and it's growing, and the banks have tremendous amount of cash to influence politicians and to influence government bureaucrats and to influence maybe judges. I'm not saying that they have been, but there's some very strange, but around the country, there is a lot of very courageous politicians, a lot of very courageous judges who are just going for the truth. Because that's all we have, and that's all we need is the truth. Because the truth is that this mortgage was probably unlawfully induced. There was probably a deception on the part. There was violations of a whole smorgasbord of federal regulations by the originator, the appraiser, the real estate broker, and the bank is just the servicer. The major banks don't own any of these mortgages. They are the servicer, and they are making 30 times under the servicing agreements that were set up by part of this scam. They make 30 times the fees servicing a mortgage in foreclosure than they do servicing a loan that's performing.
And if you wanted to learn more about this, join us on our Facebook page at facebook.com/The Lou Brydges Show. That's Bridges with a Y. If you have questions, you want to have a consultation, anything, 224-513-1231. That's 224-513-1231. And the Facebook page.
Neil Garfield wrote, the truth is that they stopped the review process and, quote, settled because the regulators, the OCC and the Fed, were under a mandate to protect the banks. They were finding far too many wrongful and illegal foreclosures. The investigators testified that their small sampling they used was not random, but rather designed to show how few foreclosures were illegal, cherry-picked. But even that showed that at least 6,500 homeowners had been illegally foreclosed and evicted. This is out of a very small review sampling. The banks and regulators know that they're sitting on a time bomb, and so they swept it under the rug with these foreclosure settlements to cover up the widespread pandemic rush to illegal, wrongful foreclosures, where strangers to the transaction took title to the property at the foreclosure sale by submitting a so-called credit bid, in which they had absolutely no interest or no authority. We have situations in which, the bank, we've seen where the bank has a foreclosure judgment. Not in our cases. We try not to lose any of our cases, but we lose one or two once in a while. But where the banks have submit a credit bid, there's no cash. They get these houses for just going in, and there's no actual auction. The banks when they get a foreclosure judgment on your house, they get the house, and then they sell it, and they pocket the money. And the owner of the mortgage has been paid off. the owner of the mortgage would be better off, and if they knew about it, restructuring with you. That is our focus. That is why we have teams of people that use all the modification process while we defend the foreclosure lawsuit. We know the regulations of the modification process backwards and forwards and sideways. We know the legal system backwards and all the court rules and procedures and cases. And around the country, I'm not alone. But you need. I'm going to talk in the next segment about what you need if you're in a foreclosure attorney. But I really don't want to focus so much on that because the business is doing fine. I really want to focus on getting the truth out to the American public about this, because this is the greatest financial crime spree in history. I've been trying to tell that announcer it's greatest financial crime spree in history that is ongoing and has led to the greatest transfer of wealth in human history. These are historical times, monumentally historical times that we're going through. And the whole future of the country is at stake, because if we allow the banks to do this, our children will wake up homeless on the land that their forefathers conquered and settled. And that is what is happening, and it is just a very, very, very small few select of these very intelligent, but basically whoremongering, coke-snorting Wall Street investment bankers. That's kind of a tagline I use, and it's getting a little old now, but that's basically what we're talking about. It's the good guys, it's the truth versus the lies and the deception, and you got to stand up for what's the truth, or we're going to lose this country. And that we've come too far to allow that to happen.
Join us on Facebook, facebook.com/The Lou Brydges Show. That's Bridges with a Y.
Louis Brydges of the law firm Brydges & O & Associates, one of the leading foreclosure defense firms in the Chicago area, rejoins you now on the Lou Brydges Show. Here's Lou on how you might avoid foreclosure and deal with a mortgage that's underwater.
Welcome back, folks. If you've been listening to the show or just joining us now, we've been talking about what I consider to be the turning point in the history of our country, and losing this to the major banks. And again, I'm talking about the big national banks, the J.P. Morgan Chase, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, Deutsche, Citi, U.S. Bank. There's a couple others, and the investment banks like the Goldman Sachs, which is, everything from manipulating commodities, hoarding and storing commodities, and this trial that's going on, this Fabrice Touré, if you've been following this trial, and he's probably going to get acquitted because he does have some phenomenal attorneys, and it's hard to prove, and you've got government regulators, and the government attorneys are, quite frankly, overmatched. Oh, speaking of attorneys, I want to say a little shout out there to all my friends at Cadillus who have left the firm. There's like a mass exodus from some of these firms, and I don't know if it had anything to do, but one day at the end of court, we were wrapping up and drafting orders, and the court was adjourned, and the judge was off the bench, and there was a couple of Cadillus attorneys there, and they're nice kids and everything, and I like them, and they're doing their job, and I understand. But I've always been telling them, anytime you kids want to, leave Cadillus and come over and do something you can be proud of, double your salary and do something you can be proud of and tell your grandchildren about, give me a call, because they're very bright young attorneys. And, I said, someday you're going to have to look back and what did you do with all your skills and talents and blessings? Well, you threw people out of their homes, and as it turns out, most of the time, based on documents. I'm not saying that Cadillus is involved in the forging or the fabricating of documents, but they certainly haven't been policing their client very well. In any event, both of them, I said to them, just to kind of, in my sort of way, I said, you remember, you don't want to be the one holding the notary seal when the FBI bursts in the door. And both of them turned just pale white. I mean, their blood was drained from their faces, and they just, because they know there's a lot of strange things going on in the courts, and there's less and less of that, and the judges are really starting to scrutinize some of this stuff, and they're finding they don't have the answers. So both of those attorneys left Cadillus shortly thereafter, and actually one of them, I find out, has gone over to the defense side. So congratulations, Raj. Give me a call. But we are seeing, and so what can you do about it? Because now is the time. There's been a bunch of us who've been fighting this battle for 4 years around the country, and the worm is really turning now. And so we gotta try not to get too arrogant and too cocky about this, because there's still a long, long way to go. As Winston Churchill said, that we are not even at this is not the end. We're not even at the beginning of the end, although we are perhaps now at the end of the beginning. And now there's a new chapter that's going to start, and it's going to be called The Fight Back. And there's a lot you can do. If you're underwater in your mortgage, if you're in foreclosure, if you're facing foreclosure, there's a lot of modification programs out there, but you need to have a competent attorney. Don't hire one of these outfits that promise you a modification. They're not attorneys. First of all, it's illegal for them to take money to provide modification assistance or services unless they're an attorney. Second of all, you can get anything they can give you from the HUD counselors, and the HUD counselors are free. And there's a lot of different programs that are out there where it's free. But to be honest with you, you really need a knowledgeable attorney if you're underwater or facing foreclosure, because you have legal rights that were violated. And what goes into the equation is the claims you have against the servicer for the wrong and the originator, and the holder of the mortgage's predecessor in interest, the originator. And there's a lot of legal problems with the mortgage. And so, you might actually be, by just agreeing to a modification, you may be doing the bank a huge favor, because the servicing bank has committed a lot of violations of law. And you have a lot of claims against them. And you're helping them clean all that up by erasing all that and starting over with a modification.
And usually not a good modification.
And if you're underwater, and a modification without principal reduction, we call it a restructuring. A modification without principal reduction is probably a bad deal. And not just a little bit bad, but a really bad deal. Okay? If you're underwater, a modification without principal reduction, restructuring, is a bad deal. All right? And you can get a better deal, but you need to assert legal rights. It requires an audit, and a forensic and a securitization audit, because that will reveal the facts that they cannot refute, the truth. Remember, I tell you, we have but one weapon, and that's all we need. It's the truth. But we need to get the truth. And the truth is not always what is obvious or apparent, because let me tell you something. The lies will always come appearing as the truth. Because they're lies. It would be truthful for them to come appearing as the truth, but because they're lies. So they always try to appear truthful. The banks spend millions of dollars on advertising, all these, commercials where you see the lovely couple having a good time, and they sponsor the Chicago Marathon, and they do all this kind of stuff. Well, they also spend, on the average, $1 million per day. The 12 major banks, well over $365 million a year, each of them, on lobbying efforts. But remember, it's a government of the people, by the people, for the people. Big bank, you are none of the above. You have no business controlling the government. And the American people are not going to stand for it. Stand up and fight back. Now is the time where the tide is turning. Jump on the bandwagon. You'll be glad you did. I'm Lou Brydges. Stay with us. We'll be back after sports and weather.
Return to the Lou Brydges Show, telling the truth about the foreclosure crisis and the greatest financial crime in history. Here's Lou Brydges, an attorney on the front lines of the ongoing battle for our land.
That's the greatest financial crime spree in history, and it's ongoing. And anyway, I'm in a real roll here today, but this really gets my dander up, my passion. I mean, it's become my mission in life, and it's become a fulfilling thing. When you find something that you're good at, and you use your talents and skills and abilities to help other people and for a cause, you're not cheapening it by just doing it for the money. I mean, quite frankly, I don't mean to be, too preachy about here, and I certainly need a buck here and there to, I need to make money too, but, it's just a higher calling. I mean, and that's kind of what separates those who make the truth a partner and those who make the money the partner. And that's why I feel that we're on the side of what's right and good. And I'll always have that going for me, whether I make money or not doing it. So that's enough. Mike points out that I have not mentioned some practical advice that because Mike is also an intake person for us. That is, we give everybody a free consultation who calls. Mike and other intake people, team up with a potential, client and, get preliminary information, give them the whole, arrange for an appointment and go through, the basic parameters and prepare them and screen out people that are just really not, that there's not anything we can really do for. But everybody ultimately will get a free consultation from either my partner, Scott O., who is a brilliant attorney. I mean, when I saw Scott O. argue this case in court, I walked up to him and it was like destiny. It was like this unseen hand had brought us together, because this guy is when he's in he's one of the two sharpest attorneys in the room. And, he's very bright and does a very good job. He's a little odd. He's the opposite personality from me. He's very laid back and subdued. So we're making a very good team.
Good yin and yang scenario.
Yeah, right, yeah. And so one of us will give you a free consultation for an hour. But one thing is, if you're a lot of what people that they have a modification application pending. Well, the whistleblowers have revealed that the modification departments were giving people the runaround. They were sandbagging them. They were lying to them, giving them false information, because the banks are going to make 30 times the fees on a mortgage in foreclosure than the one that's performing. So I don't need to tell you, if you've had an application for modification pending, you should be getting the runaround. And oh my God, you're telling me some news here. Well, it was an intentional, systematic, and they're told to lie to people, to mislead them,
and tell them not to pay attention to the foreclosure process.
Right. If you've gotten a summons, I've had 1,000 people I've talked to now. It seems like that were given that were in a modification process, served with a summons, were told by the customer relations manager, CRM, or mortgage workout specialist, or whatever the terminology of the person they were dealing with, said, don't worry about the lawsuit. You've gotten a temporary modification. You're going to get a permanent one. Don't worry. And so they ignore the lawsuit. They get a default judgment, and like the default judgment starts to season. It's not like it's a month old or 2 months old. It's 6 months. It's a year old. And then they get a notice that the house is up for sale, and they get it, or sometimes they don't even get a notice of that. They get a notice. I've had so many people that got a notice, your application for permanent modification has been denied, and oh, by the way, we foreclosed on your house, and you've got to be out in 30 days.
Hear it over and over
because
again.
Because they ignored the lawsuit. That's how these banks work. I mean, you got to be saying to yourself, you're kidding me. No, you ask around. This has happened to thousands of people.
And that person in the modification department that was helping you got a $50 gift card for helping get you there.
Yes, and they give them bonuses. I mean, you don't believe me? Go to our website. We've got the affidavits from the whistleblowers at Bank of America, PNC, JP Morgan, Wells, all of them. There's whistleblowers coming out because, there's a thing about the truth. That's why I say that's all we need. That's all we have. That's our only weapon. We don't have all the money in the world. We don't have all the guns and money and lawyers from the Randy Newman song that the banks have. But we do have the truth. And that's all we need. Well, we need to actually stand up and use it. And we need to have the guts and the willpower to use it. But we've got all the weapons we need. It's just up to us American people, to stand up and stop this. Because the more and more people that speak the truth, the more and more people you tell about the show, that you tell about what you've heard, the more you get involved in this, talk about this. And if you're underwater or in foreclosure, never give up the land. It's your home. That value of that land comes in large part from you caring for it and making it a home, a family home. That's the fabric of our society. That's the fabric of our country, is the home. Next Christmas, you got to watch It's a Wonderful Life, because that's what it's all about. Do you want this country to be Pottersville, or do you want it to be whatever the town was called? It's a Wonderful Life. Do you want it to be Pottersville? Because that is, exactly what could happen. It goes one way or the other. And we're going to go the other way because these banks are given too much, the taking over the OCC, but there is a whole movement that's starting, and it's going to be so refreshing because it's going to be based on the truth. And it's been going for about 4 years now, and it's gathering steam and momentum. And it quite frankly, it starts with, if you're underwater in your mortgage, you're overpaying. Why should you be depriving the family of a summer vacation? Why should you, if you're in a $150,000 house and paying a $250,000 mortgage, you're paying $1,000 too much about. $1,000 per month that you could be using on your, hockey equipment or piano lessons or family trip to Jellystone Park or something. And that's what it's about, because, this transfer of wealth has been from the American homeowner, the regular American person like you and me, to 1,000 or 2,000 of these very, very intelligent people who have used their skills and talents and abilities to screw over the other members of their tribe.
224-513-1231.
But when the strength of the wolf is in the pack.
/the Lou Brydges Show.
Welcome back to the Lou Brydges Show with Louis Brydges, one of Chicago's leading foreclosure defense attorneys. Here's Lou to tell you what to look for when hiring a foreclosure defense attorney and how to avoid being conned on AM 560. The Answer.
It's Bedford Falls. My lovely producer, Debbie Schreiber, knew right away it's Bedford Falls. Do you want to be Pottersville or do you want to be Bedford Falls from It's a Wonderful Life? Because that's, a remarkable thing. But
because the banks would like it to be Pottersville.
Yeah, well, Mr. Potter was a banker, and that's what they're like. And Thomas Jefferson warned us that if the American people ever allow the private banks to take over the control of the currency, and then the banks and the corporations that will grow up around them will deprive the people of all their property until their children wake up homeless on the continent their fathers conquered. You see, mortgages used to be done by a local bank, loaning local money that was belonged to local depositors, people in the community, to other people in the community so they could build their home or start their business. But when Glass-Steagall was repealed back in 96 or 95, the major banks were allowed to use all the cash and deposits to just engage in every kind of business, from buying commodities to servicing mortgages to originating mortgages and getting the brokerage commission. So basically they're allowed to, by originating mortgages, take Washington Mutual. They don't have to loan any Washington Mutual money. They just have to broker the mortgage, keep the servicing, and the government, it's going to be a government-guaranteed mortgage or it's going to be sold on the secondary market to private investors that are made up of trust funds. Made up of public employee pension funds and the like. And they're going to just make money by taking the gravy out of a loan, and that is the servicing fees. And regardless, they're actually going to make more money in servicing mortgages in foreclosure, and they're going to, because they control the originate a lot of mortgages that are in foreclosure. So we'll talk more about the WAMU JP Morgan Chase situation, because it's come out that, JP Morgan Chase doesn't actually own the mortgages. All they bought were the servicing rights, yet they have probably foreclosed on about 1 million more WAMU mortgages. So there is a time bomb ticking. And there's a lot of things you can do if you're underwater or somebody is underwater, if you're facing foreclosure, if you're in foreclosure, even if there's been a foreclosure judgment entered, there's some things we can do, we may be able to do. Even if their home has been up, you've got to notice my home's up for sale. It may not be too late because the judgment may be defective. Give us a call. Thank you for listening to the show. Tune in next week. Join us on Facebook. Mike is going to give you some information.
Facebook.
But whatever you do not give up the land. Fight for truth and justice, and I guarantee you'll never be alone.
Facebook.com/The Lou Brydges Show, 224-513-1231. By the way, that was Bridges with a Y. And remember, for evil to prosper, all it really takes is good men to stand by and do nothing.
That's right. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. We look forward to seeing you. And if you could, write in with some questions you have and call in. We really need to... we want to expand this. We want to join forces with the others around the country that are doing this.
We want a national dialogue.
Yeah, a national dialogue. We need it. And you can be part of the, an army.
The movement.
You've been listening to the weekly radio broadcast of The Lou Brydges Show with attorney Louis Brydges, telling the truth about foreclosure. Have you received threats of foreclosure? Are you in a foreclosure right now, seeking a loan modification, considering strategic default, or any other legal action? Know and protect your rights, and do not give up the land. Lou Brydges' passion is to help you keep your home and achieve your legal goals. To receive a free consultation, which may help you decide how to defend against foreclosure, understand your options, and learn what to look for in choosing a foreclosure defense attorney, call 224-513-1231. That's 224-513-1231. or visit FightIllinoisForeclosures.com. That's FightIllinoisForeclosures.com. Get real answers from a real foreclosure defense firm and discover the legal tools at your disposal. Tune in to AM 560 The Answer next Saturday morning at 8 for The Lou Brydges Show, telling the truth about foreclosure.